Hello there, and welcome to another episode of Cutting Through the Bullshit. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Snyder, and I am a high performance mentor. Through my unique blend of strategy, mindset, and intuition, I help men and women to cut through the BS in order to create the life and business they desire. So, those of you watching on YouTube, we have a different setting today. My children are home for Christmas break, and my office doesn't have a door. So I have locked the bedroom door and we are hanging out by the fireplace. And this is where it's going to happen. So I don't, you know what? We're just gonna kind of catch up with things, right? Where we are headed into the new year. So I am recording this a couple of days before Christmas, and I made a big decision last night. Not really a big decision. I recommitted to something last night, and I woke up this morning with some heavy energy. Just very much a whole lot of self-doubt and a lot of belittling negative nonsense that I was actually hanging out and having conversations with. And I shared this a little bit on my Facebook page the other day that when I was teaching the Love and Money Masterclass, this last session of it, this last round, there were some things that came up for me during the program. And one of those things was my lack of boundaries with myself. And it was really interesting because I kind of pride myself on having boundaries in terms of like with my time, right? Being able to say no to things that don't fulfill me, things that aren't are not a priority, right? And I started that years ago, and so I feel really good about being able to say no to things. And what came up for me was lack of boundaries in other areas of my life with myself. And there was some real resistance that was coming through this morning in terms of that. A whole lot of like, I don't want boundaries because they're restrictive. I don't want boundaries because it makes me shrink. I don't want boundaries because like there was a whole lot of naysaying coming up, right? And I was half entertaining it, but half justifying it as well. Being like, well, you know, a boundary does feel restrictive there. But as I begin to look at it a little bit more and pay attention to it, the purpose of the boundary actually shifted for me. And it wasn't so much being restrictive, it was more protective. And as it started to shift, the energy got lighter around it because I started to think to myself, okay, how could I use this boundary in a way that actually benefits me? Why am I resisting this boundary so much? And what was coming up again was like just this idea of being restricted as opposed to being protected. Now, when you think of a boundary, right, we often refer to boundaries in terms of our relationships with other people, right? How do we say no to that? But what I have found, and this is a really great illustration, because boundaries are very masculine. If you think of a cup, right? Like we think of my water bottle, right? The water bottle itself is a container which would bound the water, right? It's a boundary for the water. Whatever the water does inside of that is free and flowing and all the things, right? But it is protected in the water bottle instead of being restricted, right? Now, the reason that I'm talking about this shift is because oftentimes we think, well, when I say no to somebody or something or some investment or some time commitment or whatever it is, that I'm restricting myself. It's actually a punishment, right? And the shift on this is that it's not a punishment. It is actually an opportunity for you to be protected per se from maybe someone else's energy, from being overwhelmed, from stretching your priorities or your resources too thin, right? And if you've been in my world for some time, when I refer to resources, I talk about time, money, and energy. Overwhelm happens when you are unrealistic with any three of those resources. And when you don't have any boundaries around those three resources, that's where life starts to spiral and you get out of control. And so the boundary to it is not to restrict you, but it's actually to keep you in alignment, right? If you think of the banks of a river, right? The banks of the river don't necessarily restrict the water, but it keeps the water in alignment, headed down to the stream where it ultimately is intended to go anyways. And so boundaries are not restrictive, as in like the water bottle, the water can come out of the bottle. It's not restrictive. The masculine boundaries are not restrictive to the feminine energy. It's protective. It gives you a guidance system to ensure that you are operating in alignment. And that is very different than being restricted. And so I don't want to take up much time on this episode because I've already hit the point. But I want you to just consider your relationship with boundaries. Because if a boundary of saying no really hits you like your inner child just wants to scream and yell about it, that's something to look at and begin to shift, because the boundaries are there to help you stay in alignment and to continue to move towards your highest self. So think on those three resources: your time, your money, your energy. And could you use some better boundaries around those things going into the new year? And then what does that look like? Well, that looks like being intentional, right? Stepping back and saying, okay, here's where I spend my time, my money, my energy. Where do I not want to spend it anymore because it's no longer serving me? And start to create some boundaries around that where you're not reacting and instead responding to those things. So if this is something that you're looking forward to working with in the new year, if you're like, hey, yes, me, I absolutely need some boundaries, let's have a conversation. I would love to help you with this. I have private coaching programs. I am toying with the idea of putting together a mastermind in the new year. I don't know when that will fully launch. I don't know all the details of it yet. But if you are interested in working with me in the new year, because 2026 is going to be freaking amazing, then let's have a conversation. You can find me on Instagram. You can head over to my website, stephaniesnyderphd.com. You can shoot me an email. I will be available and answering some of those things into the new year. And this is actually going live on Christmas Eve, so you can certainly reach out to me. I would love to have a conversation with you before the new year, and we'll get you started on the right track to make the most of 2026. So I am sending you so much love. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. And as always, be you, because the world needs more of you. Bye.